Hi guys, Mark Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also Mark Zicree, Twilight Zone companion author, and this is your Twilight Zone Minute. Today we are moving down season 1 of Twilight Zone, 1959 to 1960, and we are talking about the early episodes of the Twilight Zone. Now today we're going to talk about another great episode. There's so many great episodes of the Twilight Zone, 16mm Shrine. Now, this is a fascinating episode because Rod Serling often in Twilight Zone, he would switch the genre, switch the subject, he could go anywhere in time or space to do a Twilight Zone episode, which gave him enormous freedom, not just freedom from censorship, which is why he did Twilight Zone in the first place, but also freedom to tell whatever story he wanted to tell. There was an enormous range to Twilight Zone. It wasn't just science fiction, just horror, just fantasy. It could be all of them, or even something beyond. And so the 16mm Shrine is essentially the Twilight Zone take, Rod Serling's take, on Sunset Boulevard. For those who haven't seen Sunset Boulevard, it's about a washed-up movie star who is kind of living in the past and sort of ensconced in her home and keeps, and is frightened of old age and so forth. This was directed by the great Billy Wilder, of course. Great film. If you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. So for this episode, Rod Serling and Buck Houghton, the producer of the show, cast the great Ida Lupino to play the fading movie star who watches films of her old movies over and over and over again. And Ida Lupino had been one of the great movie stars. She starred opposite Humphrey Bogart in High Sierra. She's in many great films, but beyond that, she's one of the few female directors in cinema, and she of Hollywood's golden age. And so she directed film noir. She was very talented, and she stars in this episode. And later, she would actually direct an episode of The Twilight Zone, making her the only person to both star in and direct an episode. And she was just wonderful in this episode. It's terrifically lit by George Clemens, the fabulous DP of Twilight Zone, and there's a lot of Hollywood references and Hollywood callbacks in this film. So, for instance, it was directed by Mitchell Leisen. Now, he'd been one of the great directors of Hollywood's golden era, and he returned to this, and it was the first time he'd written television. Buck Houghton knew him, and at first, Mitch Leisen was totally defeated by the idea of directing television, because he said, well, I can't finish this in 3 days. They shot it in 3 days with a day of rehearsal. And Buck Houghton sat down and said, okay, Mitch, look, make a list of all the shots you would want to do to film this story. Okay, so he did that, and he said, now, go through it and cross out those shots where you give yourself an alternative, where you give yourself a second way of doing it. So just lay down the shots that if you were going to make this and remove every secondary choice that you would have in the cutting room, just your primary choices of shots. And Mitch Leisen did that, crossed the other ones out, and he said, oh, I can do this in 3 days. And they were off and running. So beyond that, there's a great point at which Ida Lupino's character is watching one of her old movies, and there's this handsome young man, and then the actor shows up at her place, and he's an old, desiccated guy wearing thick glasses. And interestingly enough, that's Jerome Cowan, and he played Miles Archer in the Maltese Falcon. He played Humphrey Bogart, Sam Spade's partner, who gets murdered. And so again, these are classic Hollywood actors and directors. And then to top the whole thing off, they cast Martin Balsam, the great Martin Balsam, as the agent, Ida Lupino's agent, who's trying to get her to live in the present. And he had interestingly co-starred as a psychiatrist in The Time Element opposite William Bendix, the first pilot of Twilight Zone that aired as a Desilu Playhouse. And later, during the hour-long episodes of Twilight Zone, the 4th season, he would star in the new exhibit. But here he is playing an agent. He's great in it. And of course, around that time, he would also film Psycho with Alfred Hitchcock on the Universal lot. So he was always great in everything he did, and he's great in this as well. So that's your Twilight Zone Minute for 16mm Shrine. Please go to twilightzonecommentary.com. You'll be able to find out all about the 104 commentaries I'm going to do that you can get that are only available via this route, via twilightzonecommentary.com. And I think you'll have a great time. If you're a fan of the Twilight Zone, and who isn't, you'll really be in Twilight Zone heaven. So that's it for now, and we'll talk again real soon. Bye, guys.